evening, Qatar. How are we doing? How's the energy in the house? Good. Can we see some energy here? We g-
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, so we're going to talk about something really interesting, and I don't think we've covered it so far in the day, and that is Web3. Web3 has been the blue-eyed since 2020, particularly I think when the COVID started, and it continues to be so. While I know AI has been sort of competing with Web3 for some time now, but what is interesting to see is that they're almost if you just go by the sheer size of transactions in Web3, and not that it's often talked about in reports or anything else, it anyway crosses, as my friend was telling me, something along the lines of $1 trillion. So that is actually a lot of money involved and not talked about, and something that we're going to touch upon right now here in this panel. What is the market of Web3? And I don't think by any means, as the topic suggests, it's dead. It's very much alive and kicking. But the important thing to see is where are the trends going. And if you're sort of in Web3 or looking to enter Web3, then you need to understand what is the flow telling you, and where is it that you really need to put your bet in Web3. So at Entrepreneur Media, we cover Web3 and talk about every aspect of Web3, whether it's blockchain, NFTs, crypto, the B2B side of Web3. Happy to always know about your thoughts as well. So catch up with me on LinkedIn or any other place. But let me kick off with my stellar panel over here and really help us, Robby, starting with you, to help us understand, what are the Web3 trends that are emerging? They changed.
Sure.
They've been changing year on year. And particularly now, what is it that is particularly interesting in metaverse and NFTs and crypto?
Sure. I think one of the hallmarks of Web3 is actually that nothing stands still for very long. So it's constantly changing and evolving. And I think a lot of the trends that we see right now are things that are new to the space since even a year ago or before. But the main thing that I think we should focus on is the macroeconomic environment, because last year was obviously a very slow year for everybody in the Web3 space because of interest rates and economic downturn and lots of different factors globally. And I think that now having the tailwind of the Bitcoin ETFs approved in the US, which created a lot of positive market sentiment, we have tremendous interest in the sector. And so we can look back now and say that since pretty much November of last year, the market direction has shifted. And this positive sentiment means there's tremendous interest in new token launches and in people continuing to move from Web 2 into Web 3 and joining Web 3 communities. And we can see that just in the first 6 or 8 weeks of this year. We launched a token for one of our gaming investments last week called Pixels. The first day of trading was $1.6 billion. So we're quite pleased with that.
Sure, lovely.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. Jalak, as an investor, how are you sort of now weighing your investments in Web3? I mean, let's say from 2020 to now, how has your R&D changed for Web3 startups?
Yeah, well, we've been investing since 2014 in the space, and so have seen several cycles. I mean, what's exciting right now is the amount of infrastructure that's been built. There's a lot of questions on scalability, not dissimilar to the internet in 1995, 1996, when it was really slow to download anything, send an email. And what we've seen great strides in is these layer 2 solutions. How do you verify transactions better or more efficiently with zero knowledge proofs? And so that whole scaling has been built over the last few years since 2020. And that's going to enable new applications to be built and enterprises to better utilize blockchain infrastructure. So I think we're just getting to the point where we're going to see more mass adoption over the next 5 years.
Sure. And Tarek, in this part of the world, particularly for you, how has Web3 paved out? I know Middle East has been the hub of Web3, and all blockchain developments are happening here, and all metaverse investments are happening here. So what do you see here?
So true. I think the Middle East, to a big degree, has pioneered from a regulatory perspective openness towards Web3 and blockchain projects from early days. And I think to a point, to a degree, as you guys know, Hong Kong has for quite some time been one of the major hubs for Web3 because of unrest. It kind of moved to Singapore, but then to the Middle East and back and forth. But today with ADGM, DIFC, even in Qatar, there is a lot of new projects coming up where it's allowing more startups to move from hubs where they are to more central time zones like the Middle East that are open to work alongside them and draft the related regulations that could enable them to thrive. So we easily see on a weekly basis at least around 10 to 15 different startups playing in the crypto and blockchain space, and that's ignoring the gaming space, right? That lends itself really well to Web3 applications as well. So I'm excited. Middle East is really pioneering it, and we're excited to see more of those coming up.
Sure. I think we look at Middle East as really as a space for anything new that happens in Web3,
Absolutely.
as an industry. So, Robby, I know Animoca has been involved in gaming, and there have been, and gaming adoption has probably been the fastest in Web3 than we've seen in even Web2 games, because that also went and had its own journey of many years. But in gaming, we particularly seen a very good adoption in Web3 space as well. But really, for any kind of tech to thrive, it's about the adoption that happens, and the more consumers that come to the party is when the industry really starts becoming upbeat and taking off. So what in your view needs to be done in order for that mass adoption and more consumer participation to happen in Web3 gaming or metaverse or other aspects?
So I think the gaming industry, just to wind back and give you a little bit of a view, the gaming industry was actually still relatively niche up until the advent of the smartphone. So up until 2008, gaming had transitioned from console to PC, and then as well as console. And when mobile started, it completely transformed gaming. So it doubled the size of the industry, but more importantly, it increased it from a player base of a couple 100 million people around the world to 6 billion people around the world. So the smartphone really enabled everybody on Earth to become a gamer. And so at that point, it then became the world's entertainment medium. And I think the reason that adoption has been relatively fast of Web3 technologies for gamers is because Web3 actually is very suited to the behaviors that gamers already exhibited. So they buy virtual currency, and they spend virtual currency to buy virtual items. This is a very learned behavior for gamers.
Right.
So we just offer them a better way to do it, actually, with Web3. We unlock lots of features through this technology. I think in terms of mass adoption, that actually is something that we're doing with a bit of resistance and headwind from existing Web2 distribution platforms.
Right.
So once platforms like the mobile platforms of Facebook and Google, or the online platforms, places like Steam, Epic now has finally allowed Web3 games in their store, so that's one distribution angle. But these are still kind of choke points of distribution for traditional games. And so we've had to find ways in which to get our games distributed outside of those channels, which is more challenging.
And mind you, all these traditional channels are today experimenting with everything Web3 and blockchain.
Correct.
So it's just a matter of time until they kind of adopt those. And I think by the time we will stop calling it Web3, we'll just infrastructure.
Sure.
It's like we don't keep calling it internet, right? It's going to be just part of how we do business.
Sure. Okay, but since the session is on Web3, let's stick to the semantics right now. But, Robby, just to take what you said, is the gaming industry in Web3 still device dependent, or do you think things have changed?
No, not at all.
But do you think that creates better experiences? As it originally started out to?
So I think the key element that Web3 offers is the ability to own digital items. So this ownership paradigm changes completely the relationship of the game developer or publisher to the user, and also changes the experience of the user in the game. Because today in Web2, people spend money to buy stuff that they don't actually own. They think they own it, but they don't actually own it. And once you own it and you have the ability to do what you like with it, whether to sell it or trade it or bring it from one experience to another, that completely changes your relationship with the product. So I think that's a very important fundamental. Now, if you're talking about other like XR technologies like VR or AR,
Yes.
they're very interesting, but those, in my mind, are ways to access experiences, not the fundamental experience. So I think Web3 and the digital ownership goes to the fundamental part of the experience that transcends all of those different methods of access.
Okay. You want to comment on that?
No, I'm good. Said it all.
Okay, so I'm going to touch upon another aspect, Jalak, which I would like you to take up is which is enterprise and blockchain. So, the migration from Web 2 to Web 3, how fast is it happening today? And is there real opportunity to have like a SaaS for blockchain, a cloud transformation, digital transformation, startups for blockchain in times to come? And do you see them sort of happening at some major pace?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think enterprise blockchain has been slow to take off just because, I mean, we have legacy systems in place. And the cloud just, a lot of companies just started adopting the cloud not that long ago. And then we're now talking about hybrid environments or moving some data off the cloud. But it's definitely going to happen, and we're already seeing, like in the financial services industry, J.P. Morgan, a number of firms starting to, tokenize assets on blockchains, and so I think we'll start to see those sorts of use cases emerge, and they're going to be invisible, just like the internet has become an invisible part of the way business models operate. We're going to see the same thing happen with blockchain technology. We see it in the healthcare industry. We're seeing it in the insurance industry. So there are these like wedges that are kind of the low-hanging fruit where companies are able to test out some of these blockchain. Some of the blockchain infrastructure, and then if you look at SaaS models, half of what our fund looks at is SaaS models, and if you look at like selling data analytics for crypto transactions, that's a SaaS model. We have market makers that are selling software to hedge funds, and so there definitely is a SaaS model out there. And then there's the crypto economic model, which is the real disruptive model, which is let's sell tokens, let's get developers and creators and all market participants to own the token and participate in the upside. And that's going to take a lot longer, and it'll take longer for enterprises to get on board with that because there's still a lot of regulatory uncertainty around tokens. But I do believe that's going to happen in the next 10 years.
And how are we really building up more talent across countries, across geographies for Web3 to really, thrive and grow faster? I mean, honestly, if I go out and look for people in blockchain, it's hard to find them even on places like LinkedIn. You don't know who.
Well, it depends on how the market. Now that
Telegram.
No, but now that Bitcoin is close to 60K again, the blockchain will reappear on those LinkedIn searches. No, I think actually the talent pool has been growing in the sector, and I've been investing since '99, a venture investor since '99, and I get calls from entrepreneurs I invested in 20 years ago who are really excited about the promise of Web3 and Web3 business models and hybrid infrastructure, and so we're seeing that migration also from Web 2, some Web 1 entrepreneurs moving to Web3. So we have new developers. I think this is a generational shift. I think young people just innately understand why this ownership matters. They're used to that. They're digitally native. It's a no-brainer for them. It's the older generations that have had a tougher time wrapping their arms around
Absolutely.
it. Sure. So, if we talk about globalization of Web3, particularly, Middle East has become a big hub. And as I talked about a talent problem, so you probably have the biggest talent for Web3 sitting here, right here in GCC. Same for Hong Kong, where we've seen a lot of, Animoca grows so big and lots of other small Web3 companies also becoming bigger. So do you feel that these markets are going to be the new hubs of Web3 coming up, as we go forward, um, do you also see some other? I mean, Miami, where Jalak comes from, has also been the sort of the heartland of Web3 as well. You know, whether it was crypto or whether it was metaverse. I remember the Bitcoin biggest conference used to happen in Miami for several years. So, um, are we going to see new hubs uh, or new markets in which Web3 will thrive, which might just be very different from a lot of Silicon Valleys and so on?
I think if I were to point at a generalized trend, I would have said it's basically everywhere except the US. Honestly, because I think, unfortunately for the U.S., they've had a lot of difficulty from a regulatory standpoint. So the uncertain regulatory environment means that it's holding back investment for U.S. companies and into U.S.-based businesses in Web3 because they don't know how they need to react, whereas the regulatory situation here in the Middle East or in Asia or even, frankly, in Europe is more clear, so companies are willing to invest.
Yeah, I would, take that, and I think the U.S. is an important market regardless, and we invest globally. I think it's important in crypto and the sector. This is a borderless kind of sector. We made a lot of regulatory moves forward last year, and I think it was in the wake of FTX, and then we saw the judgment against Binance, and so I do think the U.S. is moving forward. At the end of the day, it has legacy regulation, and it is a democracy, and so things don't get turned on and off like they do in other parts of the world that have banned crypto and then rescinded the ban, and so I still think a lot of entrepreneurs want to operate in the U.S. It's a significant market. Now,
and also, I wasn't saying it's dead by any means.
Yeah.
I think it's just the nuance being that it's not going to be the hegemony like in Web2,
No,
where basically 90% of the action was in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think that's
speaking.
what's most exciting about this sector is that we can really see democratization of tech creation, of who gets to benefit from the upside. And so this broad participation is why, I started the fund 10 years ago focused on the sector. Yeah.
Sure. We're almost running out of time, so I don't want to take the party away from crypto here. So, we've seen Bitcoin touching a new high, and do you think it's going to bring the renewed interest back that is required in Web3 for tokens, for crypto, and for Web3 at large? So very quickly, the entire panel, starting with you, Robby.
I'll just say yes.
Yes, I was going to say you had this successful token launch last week.
100%.
So,
The market is completely back.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, we don't believe it. Even when it slowed down, it didn't really go down.
Yes.
It was actually very, very strongly, positioned to stay stale. Growth didn't go down. It plateaued, which is a significant testament to the beauty of what Web3 brings to the table. I think we're just learning how to make utility out of it and case studies. I think that's kind of the use cases is a big word here to underline. And that we are seeing more and more coming in with regulations stepping up, and it's gonna happen. I think Middle East is gonna be one of those big hubs that will lead the world into Web3 adoption.
Sure. And finally, Robby, Web3 real estate.
Yes.
And tokens. How are they going to find more, closer, amicable friendship between each other?
Oh, I think they already do. I think the way I view things that we do in entertainment, for example, you have to split economic tokens, so fungible tokens, and then tokenized content. And so I think every application has the potential to have both tokenized content as well as some kind of governance token that gives economic value or participation to the players.
Sure. So any parting thoughts, Jalak, or
No?
no? So, as our stellar panel has pointed out, Web3 is not going anywhere. So please, let's get back to investments. More crypto, more token, more metaverse investments need to happen. And I think it's just, once again, in this new cycle, we'll probably see far more newer investments taking shape and big startups getting built right here. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you to
Thank
all
you.
the
Thank
you.
panelists for
Thank
great,
you.
wonderful insights.